This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and a grant from the Wells Fargo Foundation, Minnesota.
Hi, and welcome to this Schubert Club Music Museum Mini. My name is Josh Cameron, and today I'm going to introduce to you this instrument, the trumpet. So the trumpet is the smallest member of the brass family of instruments. And like all other brass instruments, they of course are made of metal, made of brass, and they are basically made of a length of tubing, the sound travels through the tubing and comes out to the end here called the bell to help project that sound forward. Now, the trumpet, being the smallest member of the brass family, also makes the highest sounds in the brass family of instruments. And it does that because this length of tubing is the shortest of all the brass instruments. If I were to stretch all of this tubing out, it would be about 5.5, maybe 6 feet long. Okay? Not easy to carry around that way, so they kind of wind up all that metal, so it's a lot easier to hold and a lot easier to play. To make sound on a trumpet, or on all brass instruments, we use vibration, just like any instrument. And similar to woodwind instruments like flutes and clarinets, brass instruments are wind instruments. So we have to use air from our bodies. We kind of blow into the instrument to help us get that sound. Now, for brass instruments specifically, we have to use our lips to get that vibration. And when we hold our lips together like that, and then we try to blow air through the lips, that helps get the lips started vibrating like this. Sounds kind of funny, not exactly very musical, but once we start to buzz into this part of the instrument, this is called the mouthpiece, we start to get more of a tone, more of a buzzing sound that sounds a little bit more like a note, and it sounds like this. You know, still not exactly the most musical thing in the world, but you could start to play songs on this if you wanted to, you know. You can start to play some music on the mouthpiece kind of by controlling the vibration a little bit. But what really helps us get that brassy sound is when we put the mouthpiece into the instrument, make that same vibration with air and our lips, and it creates more of the brassy sound that you know. So that is how we make sounds on the trumpet. And then we have these 3 buttons called valves, or pistons, if you will, that we push down to change the length of tubing on the instrument to help us get different pitches on the instrument. So for every single combination of valves that we have a whole series of notes that we can use. And I can change those notes by controlling the speed of my air to help control the speed of the vibration of my lips. That makes brass instruments particularly tricky because not only are we controlling our air as well as our fingers, or maybe the slide in terms of a trombone, we have to coordinate all of that together, how fast our air is in combination with what our fingers are doing as well. Trumpet or brass instruments are some of the oldest instruments in the world. Going back thousands of years to ancient civilizations when people would just use something as simple as an animal's horn or a hollow piece of wood or bone or something like that to create a sound similar to how you saw me do it before, using vibration, to create some kind of a signal. You know, a very simple rendition of that would be something like this. maybe just playing a single tone or just a couple different notes on a ram's horn. That developed further into something more like a long tube of metal once metalworking became more developed and people figured out how to do that better. So then they started to fashion more trumpet-like instruments or horns out of bronze or other metals that they could mine out of the ground. Primarily, these instruments, we'll call them, were used for signaling purposes or ceremonial purposes, even civic purposes, not really for music yet. Those types of signaling uses for the trumpet are still in use today in some respects. Think of the bugle calls that you might hear in today's military, something like this. Something like that, reveille, is used to say, wake up, troops, it's time to get up, it's time to start doing your duties. Now, the instruments that they used back then didn't look like this, of course. They might have had a bell at the end like this and still use some type of a mouthpiece, but they were either a straight tube of metal, maybe a very long straight tube of metal, or when they learned how to bend metal, they would maybe wrap it around once or twice. That was until close to 1800, about 1792, when an Austrian trumpet player by the name of Anton Weidinger invented a keyed trumpet or a keyed bugle. Think about a bugle or a trumpet like this, but instead of buttons, it had 7 separate little keys on it that opened up little vent holes on the tubing. They could now play a melody on that. So you can imagine the corner that the trumpet turned at that time in history and how it just opened up a whole world of music for trumpet players at that time into the early 20th century when this new musical art form called jazz started to become more popular. Eventually, artists like Louis Armstrong, who learned on the cornet, decided to start picking up the trumpet and make that their primary instrument for their soloing and playing jazz music. Here's a little bit, kind of the end of W.C. Handy's St. Louis Blues, played on the trumpet. From that jazz era, that ushers in the modern age of the trumpet playing. Let's just say World War II on is basically the modern age of the trumpet, where they look like this, they sound like this. Post-World War II, there was a reemergence of Baroque era music. And players at that time, they had been playing Baroque music, the music of Bach, the music of Handel, but they were doing it on larger trumpets. But it was grueling work. It took a lot of strength to play that music. So a new instrument was invented, and that's where we have the piccolo trumpet. Now, the piccolo trumpet is literally half the length of the regular B-flat trumpet. So again, the shorter the tube, the higher the sounds go. So using the piccolo trumpet to play all those higher melodies made it a lot easier to play some of that really difficult Baroque era music that would have been played on longer horns a long, long time ago. First, on the B-flat trumpet, Still easier than playing it on a natural trumpet because I can use my fingers and the valves to change the notes. But now, if I play it on the piccolo trumpet, makes it so much easier to play those higher melodies on this smaller instrument. Piccolo trumpet is now been introduced into pop music, rock music, orchestral music, and you start to hear it around the world as well when people want this light and bright, sparkly kind of sound out of the trumpet. Another new innovation around the 20th century was for this instrument called the flugelhorn. And the flugelhorn is used to create a much more mellow sound. You can tell by the large bell and how open it is that it's going to have a different sound than the trumpet is. It's not going to project as far. It's going to sound much more warm. It was also introduced later on in the 70s into pop music by an artist by the name of Chuck Mangione. He became very popular around then, and he popularized this instrument, kind of brought it into the public eye with tunes like this, like Feels So Good. And that leads us to today, where myself as a trumpet player and many other people that I know, we have several of these different kinds of instruments to play a wide range of musical styles, from jazz to classical to commercial styles of music, Latin music, and brass quintets and other ensembles that we can pick and choose between all these different instruments when we want different sounds and different colors in that brass family of instruments. So we basically have trumpets in every key to fit every different need that we would want, and it's still, I think, one of the most versatile instruments out there today that a musician can choose from. Thank you very much for joining us for this Music Museum Mini.